Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of the Geeks Group podcast. I'm your host, Karim, and with me, my beautiful co host,
Josie Lopez.
Josie Lopez. And today we're going to be talking about remote work. Um, the new reality that the pandemic has really set upon us. Gonna have very interesting conversation about what we've gone through over the last few years, um, the pre-pandemic situation, and then the post-pandemic, and then the forever going forward workplace and the nature of the workplace. Josie, welcome.
Thank you. So, it's actually a phenomenon known as the future of work and kind of what it looks like now, what it'll look like in the near future, and what it'll look like 10 to 15 years from now. I actually believe that remote work was really catching on pre-pandemic. Like maybe 5 years before that, the talent market was actually asking for it. They started asking for it before it was a thing. They wanted flexibility of work where they can come and go as they please, and not be tied down to a physical location. So I believe that the pandemic just basically facilitated that and forced employers to give the employees what they were already kind of screaming for.
Yeah, let's go back in time. You remember the good old days where you had to be in the office to work? We've gone a long way. I remember the very first time I worked from home was we used to call this thing called the VPN. Remember that? You used to connect to the VPN. You had to request IT to kind of give you access, which is kind of like what we do today. But back then, remote work was not something that you did on a daily basis. It was something that you did on crunch time, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you had a project to deliver, and there was not going to be anybody in the building to open the door, so the only way out was to actually connect to your computer at work and do the work.
And there was almost like a badge of honor. If you had been trusted to go home and work from home and kind of set up the structure for you to work from home, you must be trustworthy.
Correct, right? And you had to be special to get that access, right?
Right.
It was like you said, it was a bragging rights. Well, guess what? I got VPN. I can connect and work from home, right?
Yeah.
So, and then that evolved slowly. That theory has been proven that, you know what, people could connect and work from home. And then the question became, can they be productive working from home?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And for a while, the consensus was that working from home was good for a short period of time, but people were always, or employers have always been worried about their employees' productivity.
Right. I think also the talent market has changed. I mean, you have your boomers that are very much discipline oriented and they're used to kind of being in a workspace, and also digitization of documentation wasn't there. So you had a lot of physical documents, a lot of physical things that needed to be completed. And as the digital transformation took over and at work, it facilitated the ability to work from home. And also the demographics of the talent changed, right? So you have the boomers that are starting to exit, right? And then these millennials that are starting to come in that really view autonomy as not a like an added plus, but like a must. Like, I need to have autonomy over my time. And these millennials started having children, and more so we wanted autonomy over when we worked, how we worked, and where we worked, right?
Yeah, talking about that, I mean, there certainly has been a transition, even pre-pandemic, towards the end of the last 4 or 5 years before the pandemic. We've started seeing a lot more people requesting remote work, right?
Yeah.
Or they call it how many in-office days you required back then. Like, oh, is it? And then the jobs that were offering 100% remote or mainly remote, they were really attractive. A lot of people wanted those jobs.
Yeah, it was a hidden compensation, right? It was part of the compensation package, but
Correct.
without like flexible work hours, for example.
And back then, it was mainly because, like you said, it's not really the hidden compensation was the savings that the employees had from not having to go to work, whether it's commute time in some heavy areas, like it could be like uh, if you drive, then you got parking fees that you're saving. Um, so it, it was very interesting too because it allowed people to get jobs that they otherwise wouldn't have had because there's no way they would be in the office 100% of the time. People were willing to commute longer for those 1 or 2 days they had to go to the office than have a shorter commute 5 times a week.
Yeah, so let's talk about the pros and the cons. So, not only did the employee get access to jobs that they didn't otherwise have, but I think employers got access to talent that they wouldn't otherwise have, right?
Correct, correct. That's definitely something that a lot of companies have actually moved towards that pre-pandemic. It was mainly because of that to get access to talent, especially in market where talent was becoming a little bit um, unaffordable. Right? Some highly competitive talent markets, say the Bay Area, for example. For a startup in the Bay Area, having the workforce be in office is almost impossible. Um, Even right before the pandemic, I think 2020, what has happened, what now we can talk a little bit about the pandemic and the effect of that. And we've seen it. A lot of people were very reluctant on activating the remote work policy, even after the pandemic started. 'Cause a lot of people thought, of course, oh, it's a 3 week thing, and we'll be back in work at no time. And then there's a couple of things that I think have really helped the acceptance of remote work through the pandemic. I think the first one is we didn't have a choice. So people are really change resistant unless you put them in a situation where change is the only option. Right? So I think that really, really helped. And the second part is, I believe, the democratization of technology. I gave the example back in the day where you had to go to IT and install a VPN, and then you had to use a separate computer, one at home and one at the office. You connected from one to the other. Well, with the cloud revolution, basically you didn't even need to have VPN. Most jobs that worked on Office productivity suites, they just needed access to internet, to a browser and the internet, and they could do the job just as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you're 100% right. Now, all of those pros, I think, also come with cons. You're reporting just a very depressed population. You know, being home and being isolated from our peers is, I think, you're going to start to see mental health really become an issue in the next couple of years. I mean, it's already an issue. It was already an issue during the pandemic, but I think now post-pandemic, it will continue to be an issue. The Gartner report that came out for the global talent in June, just a couple of weeks ago, reported that 6 out of 10 employees are quiet quitting, and their just engagement is at an all-time low. Pandemic wise, it was like at 13%. Post pandemic, it's at 23%. Still not a very good number, right? And a lot of that is humans. I don't think we're meant to be alone. We're meant to be a community. We're meant to, be amongst our peers, right? And being locked up at home, not having that interaction, I think is going to cause some mental health concerns.
All the modern business books, when you read them, they're always talking about culture and belonging and employee morale, employee engagement. And I think a lot of companies have done a really good job building an in-person culture. Um, Building a culture that depends on presence, because, like you said, it is a lot easier for someone to pick up on a coworker's demeanor just by being in the same room, just seeing how they nod or how they nod. or how what their reaction to a certain topic goes, right? So you could read that and then have a coffee side conversation. So we took all that away. Well, not we, but the pandemic basically being forced to work remote took all that away, and then the culture all of a sudden got also left behind. And I think a lot of organizations that had amazing cultures, like if you look at their campuses, it's really built around flex workspace, cafeterias, gyms, right? All of a
Hmm.
sudden, all those areas are empty. The camaraderie is gone. Sense of belonging was challenged, and these companies had to find a way to be innovative and creative and bring that culture online. And and I believe there was a lot of challenges in that.
Well, I think as technology matures, we'll pivot and we'll find new ways of creating that community and culture in a digital format. So, virtual campuses, you're starting to see them pop up. And by virtual campus, like you could start with virtual reality, where it's just, hey, a virtual version of what we see here. Or, you might see augmented reality, where, you can create characters and people can actually take alter egos of themselves and, create spaces that are even better than the physical locations. So I think as technology gets better and as we start to embrace, hey, this is the future of work. People want, by people, the talent market want flexibility. They want to be able to come to work. They want to be able to say what time they leave. They want to, have more autonomy over their time. And us as employers kind of pivoting and saying, okay, I'm hearing you. What can we do? What is there in the market right now that I can help pivot into that? So whether it's a virtual campus or virtual space, whether it's peer-to-peer recognition on a virtual format, Microsoft Teams, Google Teams, they're doing great things on peer-to-peer recognition.
That virtual
Yeah,
environment,
so for
and I believe that technology will help, whether it's augmented reality, virtual reality, that should play a role into building that community virtually, and of course, we can't forget about talking about the future of work, right? The future of work is definitely remote. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. But we also have to talk about the future of workplaces.
Yeah.
What happens to all these offices now that are so beautiful? Um, People don't want to go back to work, so they're more like ghost offices.
Well, I think two dynamics there. The first one is results oriented work, where it's like, I'm not counting how productive you are depending on the amount of hours that you're clocked in. I'm really measuring how your performance is based on the deliverable. How much did you deliver? And whether there's a tracking system or a metric system to evaluate performance based work versus hourly based work, right? And then the second one is, once we've figured that out, then we can really start embracing the workplace or the physical location for coordination and team building. Because then you're not thinking, oh, well, um, I'm losing money by having this huge space because the people aren't here. Yeah, the people aren't here, but they're still very productive.
I agree. I do think that the workplace going forward is not going to be a place of work. It's going to be a place of gathering.
Yeah,
It's going to be a
community and
place of
gathering.
community. It feels like, as somebody who embraces remote work, who enjoys remote work, there is a nostalgia about, well, maybe or a sense of pride, a sense of belonging, to go into a place where you call home, like having a reference point that myself and my coworkers know for a fact that that is our permanent home. We might all be satellite right now, but once a quarter, once a month, once a year, we get together in this place that we are all proud of. So I think, like you said, it's always going to be needed as a gathering point. Not sure, and we've seen that a lot. Companies are downsizing. Like, if you go downtown, the majority of the floors are open. Even beautiful, beautiful buildings with very little tenants, or maybe with enough tenants but very little occupancy. And I believe that that's the new future. I don't think that's changing. I really believe that the premise for those buildings going forward is going to be some kind of multi-use, maybe residential slash commercial conversions. Um, I believe that's where it's going to head with all the commercial real estate in the office
Yeah.
space.
And more so bringing the outside in and the inside out. What do I mean by that? As you said, multi-use locations, right? And a lot of millennials want to feel like they're part of an organization that is bigger than themselves and have a purpose. So if you do have a space and it is being underutilized, and yes, you're still using it as a communal ground for your team members to come back and collaborate, maybe the first floor is part of the community and you're going to engage in an accelerator, an incubator, or a lab or some sort where your team members come when they come, but they also see the change in the philanthropy within the space, and it's just another added reminder of, hey, we're part of something bigger. um,
That is a great point. I think a lot of companies that have those spaces, they're probably not thinking about that. They're not thinking about how can we put this extra space to the use of the community? How can we build a stronger following within the boundaries of our neighborhood, our city?
right.
And I think that's a great point. Very
Yeah,
good.
because some things still need to happen in person, right? Like a summer camp for example.
Learning's always
Learning,
better.
right? It's
Yeah.
it's better, and you can do theory based, but you also need practice and kind of again reimagining, redesigning, and thinking outside the box, and say embracing it instead of fighting. Hey, I don't want to go here. Well, you know what? You might not want to go here as an employer, but guess what? Your employees and your staff, they're already there. you know?
And of course, I mean, since a lot of companies are now remote, kind of forced to do that, being remote always gives us plenty of data. Right? There's a lot of data points out there that a company can collect from their usage, from their users, that they can analyze and then find out what's the best use for their resources, whether it's people, whether it's locations, whether it's assets. There's always a way to better use your resources now that you're remote, because for the most part they sit idle, not being used. So if you can find a way to capitalize on them, not monetarily, but you could be intrinsic value, like brand awareness, brand value.
Right.
Companies will really get a lot of recognition
Oh yeah.
from repurposing those assets and resources towards the public works.
Right, right. It could be a huge branding opportunity
Yeah.
if you embrace it.
So the future of work, we talked about what we do, who we hire, where we work. We have not talked about the future generations.
Oh,
The Obviously we talked about millennials, and because that's the majority of workforce right now, we see a lot of millennials. We work with millennials a lot, and to millennials, it's not about material compensations. It's like the intrinsic compensation that matters the most. And so
I think I can do a whole episode or multiple episodes to talk about just the context of the workforce and the new workforce that's going to be coming in. We will have a multi-generational workforce, and you will have to adopt not one but many hats, I think, going forward, and even multiple sides of the brand to really appeal to the different generations that are going to be working. But one thing for me is clear: the context in which we address millennials and Generation Y and Z and right now is in a very negative space where it's like they're the problem, they're not motivated, they're the issue, everything that happens and everything is difficult because of how they are. And I think that instead of looking at it that way, we need to start looking at them as the possible solution. They're actually the solution, not the problem. And if we embrace them and kind of, hey, what is it that they're trying to tell us? And pivot and make them believe in themselves, because that negative connotation must be like really wearing them down. And if we start motivating them and telling them, hey guys, we've got some huge challenges we got to address in the next 10, 20, 30 years. You guys are the solution. How do we bring you in? How do we make this a more motivating environment for you? How do we get the best out of you? I mean, the sky's the limit.
absolutely, and we tend to forget that just like the, there's a stigma around Gen Zers and millennials. Let's not forget that early millennials also had a stigma from the previous generation because nobody likes um, the behavior of the children in the
Yeah,
sense
it's them.
everybody gets annoyed by the next generation. Well, how can they just do it the way we did it? Well, because it's different. And like we talked about culture, right? Culture is a combination of ethics and processes and people and location together in a mix to generate um, a mix of people that identify with that culture, right?
Yeah.
And we cannot talk about the future of work without talking about the people that will be doing the future work. So I totally agree. We need to make sure that we provide the work environment, whether it's physical or virtual, that they identify with, that they want to be part of. Because one thing is for sure, this new generation, um, you know, they want to work remote, but they don't want to be alone. So
Yeah.
providing a space for them to come together um, is going to be vital for the success of future businesses because the companies that will really validate the future workforce, number one, nobody wants to feel invalidated. The company will actually include them in decision making and provide the workspace and work environment for them to thrive. I think these are the companies that will succeed in the future, and as far as employers.
Yeah, and I know that there's certain organizations that still require physical presence, so um, like retail and so on and so forth. But those organizations are going to have people in their pipeline that are virtual, and they need to have like that hybrid work environment. So I am addressing, I do understand that there are some locations that require some physicality, but you need to be able to bridge. That way you get full synergy across the board, between the remote and the physical.
I agree. Some professions I don't ever want them to go remote. Like when I'm flying, I want my pilot that's flying an airplane, right? I don't want some drone flat pilot sitting in there,
Well,
you
even
know.
though it might eventually get there, but yeah.
I'll feel safer if my fate and his fate or her fate are tied. Well, what a wonderful conversation. Um, a very dear topic to both of us. Josie, I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts on the remote future of work. I want to thank everybody for being with us today. Please share, like, and subscribe, and we will see you next time.